Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, a leading business podcast talking about business in the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American from Pittsburgh, living in Brazil, known as the King of Networking, and talking from my podcast studio in Vinhedo, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest joining us is Stuart Morgan from Swansea, Wales, in the UK. Stuart Morgan is managing partner at PDC Practice Development Consultants, and he is also program facilitator of C-level selling programs at EBDA Institut. Stuart and I met several years ago during a C-level training event here in Brazil. So Stuart, welcome again to Talk to Brazil Business Connection. Always great to be talking with you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Tom.
And Stuart, we've seen over these years things happen, come and go. We've seen really the world turn upside down. And we've seen C-level selling programs have always been important. But it seems that the need is extremely urgent, literally today, for companies to embrace another changing global business environment. Your thoughts?
Yeah, as you know, we've been doing C-level training for quite a while now, several years. But we've changed the model as the world has changed. And the global business challenges are completely different now from what they were 5 years ago or even 2 years ago before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I think chief executives in many instances are lost, they're confused. They don't know what tomorrow will bring, and yet they're still trying to use Management 1.0 model, which was designed by Henry Ford for the production plant. And I think chief execs and chief financial officers have got to start embracing Management 2.0, which is the result of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned the pandemic, which has become history today. Also, before we got online, we talked about Brexit, which for Europe, not only Europe, but for many global models, that was a game changer. That's still being assimilated. And now we have a war.
And now we've got a war. I'll talk about the war in a minute because that's affecting me and my family quite personally. But let's talk about Brexit for a minute. Last night, because it was International Women's Day, and because my wife has Ukrainian roots, I took her away to a hotel to try to calm her down a little bit and try to get her to realise that the world is still going on and It's not all about Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But when we were at dinner, we ordered a bottle of wine, and virtually every bottle of wine on the wine list was not available. And the excuse we were given was, it's due to Brexit. We can't import it anymore. And that's quite horrifying when you're wine drinkers.
And when you're having dinner, and when you find that out when you're sitting down at the table.
Too late. Yeah. So that came as a bit of a shock to us. In the end, we had to choose a wine that wasn't one of our favourites, and when we took it, the quality was quite inferior, and yet they were charging an arm and a leg for it. So that was a direct consequence of Brexit, according to the hotel, which is one of the premier hotels here in the UK. So, Brexit is having a huge impact.
Well, that seems to be the business environment and what you just mentioned, even though you're talking about a dinner table and a bottle of wine.
Absolutely.
What I've seen here in the corporate world in Brazil and other places is we think we're looking at the same menu. And,
we're not.
And we're not, and it's not there.
We're
and
not.
when you get the menu, and then your surprise was they hand you a wine card, and why didn't they take off the wines that aren't available?
Yeah.
So the updating, the constant updating to reality isn't happening.
No. And I asked about that, and the reason that the restaurant manager and general manager of the hotel gave me is they've been trying for 3 months now to renegotiate the supply of wine. And they don't know from day to day what they're going to be able to get tomorrow.
Well, take it off the wine card. Start with, a blank
remove the
page.
wine
Say,
card.
we have no wine. But in a corporate environment, I've seen that. Once you do make a contact, you've been able to talk to somebody in a company, you only find out whatever you thought they were offering, they don't have available.
They don't
They'll
have
say,
available.
logistics, and it's China, and there are no chips, and there's no this, there's no that. But everybody's just fallen behind on reality.
Absolutely. And as I said, the Management 1.0 model was invented 120 years ago. Mm-hmm. And Brexit, this war in Ukraine, the COVID, the world has changed, and it's changed forever. We're not going to go back to Management 1.0.
Right.
We're not going to have office blocks full of people moving from home to work in the morning and moving back in the evening. Here in the UK, I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, here in the UK, workers, white-collar workers in particular, have a right to ask to work from home. And employers have to have a good reason to say no. Mm. And they can ask for that on day one of the contract. I've been at home now for virtually 2 years, but I've not stopped working.
Right.
Earlier last year, I was working in 10 Northern European countries. I was working in Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Germany. But I didn't leave home. And yet the original contract that had been negotiated by the European Commission, I would have travelled to every capital city of every country mentioned, and I would have been face-to-face with policymakers and ministers of health in every country. I did all that online.
Well, when we met here in Brazil, that used to be the norm. And you
Absolutely.
traveled, you were in a plane almost all the time. You were somewhere. Literally, I think, hundreds of countries. And, we were together for a time, but then you were off, and that was it. You were around the world. Today, I generally am in contact with 2 or 3 countries during any given day.
One of the jobs I've taken on because of the pandemic, because my work pattern has changed, the demand for services has changed. Mm-hmm. And I've been working at university as a lecturer in human resource management, leadership and social policy. Mm-hmm. And within a day, I've been teaching students online in China. I've been teaching students online in India. And I've been doing interviews like this with you in Brazil. And I've been teaching face-to-face here in Swansea, all in the same day.
And still trying to get a bottle of wine.
And still trying to get a bottle of wine. I've got my own wine supplier. I'm all right for wine at home.
Well, Stuart, and we're talking about really the tomorrow matters, right?
Tomorrow matters.
But how do we cope with tomorrow when we don't even know what today's all about?
Yeah, I mentioned to you before we came online, I'm attending a series of talks by people like Tony Blair and Helen Cook, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, because they're still very influential in the world. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to get their head round how do we cope with the new normal.
Right.
And the new normal is people working from home, people not going to their office. My own son is the vice president for MasterCard. He's hardly been to his office in the last 2 years. He, like me, has been working from home. And I think chief executives, chief financial officers have got to actually grasp what the new model is going to look like.
Right.
And none of us actually know. None of us actually know.
But your training does help people construct that, because we're talking about, and what I have in my hand right now is my smartphone, my phone. So I really don't have to be at home. I can be anywhere. And wherever I am, I'm working, I'm online, I'm functioning, I'm receiving communication, I can generate communication, I can find you, we can talk. And when we talk about selling, the essence of selling, and we've talked about that before, is finding the decision maker to talk to. So what is the art of finding who to talk to?
Well, you've got to use different platforms from the conventional ones. The old email list that people are still selling at exorbitant prices is no good to most people anymore. It's out of date, and you're not getting to the decision makers, as you say. If you're just sending emails blindly to people, it's like using a blunderbuss in order to sell a product. You're not going to hit your target, or if you do, it'll be a few fragments of a shell rather than the bullet itself. So what you've got to do is learn how to use the digital tools that we've got. You've got to learn how to use big data. You've got to learn how to use your CRMs in a more intelligent way. You've got to learn to use platforms like LinkedIn.
Right.
And I'm horrified when I see people on LinkedIn posting inappropriate messages. They think they're being professional, and they're actually demonstrating just how amateur and unprofessional they are.
Right.
And then they're worried why they're not getting the business. Referral marketing is one way that we can get links, and that's still a successful model, so we can still hang on to that. But the way that we approach people has got to change. We've got to learn what the new business environment is like. We've got to learn what the impact of this war in Ukraine is going to have on global markets and global economies, global supply chains. Here in Europe, for example, we're worried about the supply of oil and gas from Russia. And we're not going to have that in future, either because we will make the decision not to buy it, or the Russians will stop us buying it. One way or another, that gas supply and oil supply chain is finished. Also, we've got to have a look at what's happening in exchange rates. I've been watching the Russian ruble, I've been watching the dollar and the pound and the euro this last week. There's a great deal of volatility in that. And if you're selling in the global market, at what price do you sell things?
Right.
You've got to improve your intelligence. You've got to future-proof yourself against the exchange rates. And how do you do that? I don't think many salespeople know how to do that, and they're probably not worried about the consequences. They're just worried about getting through the door and getting the contract signed.
Bringing the order home and ringing the bell.
Absolutely. But the product is not sold until it's paid for.
Right.
And how do you do an elevator pitch if people aren't going to offices?
Right.
An elevator pitch is supposed to be impromptu. It's supposed to be a result of a chance meeting, and then getting the ear of the decision maker and actually making an impact and getting the decision maker say, oh, that's interesting, come and talk to me. But you can't do that if you're now cold calling and using online platforms. People who are using online platforms want a quick, short meeting, and they want to know what the agenda is before the meeting.
And very
Otherwise,
objective.
they're not going to meet.
Well, we saw that before during our training program, because many times
Absolutely.
the C-level person who is the decision maker, maybe from the information he has about you as the seller, he doesn't want to talk to you. He's not
Absolutely.
impressed by anything that you've shown. He says, why should I give you 15 or 20 minutes of my time? Because I don't think you deserve that.
No, absolutely. And if you say that you're a salesperson for XYZ company and you try to talk to the chief exec, he'll say, thank you very much, have a good day. Because chief execs don't want to be sold something. They want to learn how to create value for their companies. Right. They want to learn about adding shareholder value. They want to learn about improving their corporate social responsibility. They want to talk about retaining the very best employees. Those are the three things that most chief execs are interested in. So if you're trying to sell to a chief exec, you've got to hit one of those targets. Right. Either talk about improving shareholder value for him, talk about how you can improve corporate social responsibility, or tell him how you can help him to retain the very best employees. They're the three things that are really important.
And in each one, the C-level person, what he wants to know, he wants you to tell me something that I don't know.
Tell me something unique.
Right.
And also, don't ask me to be a guinea pig.
Right.
Don't expect me to be a guinea pig. I want a tried and tested product, but I also want to be first in the market. Well, the two are incompatible. So there's a challenge. And as you know, when we've done our
you found that with your bottle of wine yesterday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you're talking to a chief exec, they want something done and they want it done quickly. Mm-hmm. And they want to know how to create that competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. The competitive advantage is a very interesting thing to consider.
Right.
And most salespeople don't want to create competitive advantage for the client. And that's a big, serious mistake. You've got to help your client improve their competitive advantage. And the only way to do that is sell them the solutions that make you a trusted partner, a trusted advisor.
The word there is trust.
Trust.
And to create that and to show that, to sell
Absolutely.
That's unique.
That's unique. And that's your added value as a salesperson. How do you add value to your sales process? By becoming a trusted advisor of your client, by being the first port of call of your client.
Because tomorrow, as we're talking about tomorrow and how do we cope with tomorrow, tomorrow as a C-level person, I want to call somebody that I trust.
Absolutely. I got a message from the chairman of Scarlet's Rugby Club in Llanelli last week, and he asked me, "Are you going to the game? Hope to see you there." And he approached me.
Right.
That was fantastic.
Right.
And that's the type of relationship that you want to engender. Mm-hmm. Because I want a business relationship with him. I want to sell him professional services. But to get a chairman, an executive chairman of a company to phone you, the potential salesperson, is tremendous. That's the type of relationship that you want.
That's it.
You don't need to sell the product or the service today. You want that long-term relationship.
Yeah, well, what I say when I talk about networking, we need to be remembered, and we need to be found.
Absolutely.
And many times we remember somebody and we can't find them.
Yeah.
So that's the also selling side. How do you keep pushing yourself forward? How do you float above the rest? That when somebody is looking for the trusted partner or the trusted information, they think of you, call you. It might be a game, a match. It might be anything. But that's how it comes. And back to what I said, they have the smartphone in their hand, they click, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. But if you don't have that network, if you don't have that relationship, you're lost, you're floundering. And I think a lot of salespeople, a lot of chief execs need to learn how to live in the new world.
Right.
We here in Western Europe and in some other countries as well, we've got tight labour markets where there are too many vacancies, not enough people. If you're a new graduate here in the UK, leaving university with a law degree, you can probably walk into a first-time job in central London on a salary of £200,000 a year. £200,000 a year. That's a tremendous amount of money for a new graduate without any experience of life.
And no trust level.
And no trust level. That's the type of world that we're moving into.
Right.
Some professions are so desperate for people, they're willing to increase their pay rates, they're increasing to offer their non-financial benefits in order to attract people. But headhunter firms have caught onto this because they're offering to let people introduce people, and then after 3 months they're headhunting that person to go to another firm.
Yeah, and I see that as a challenge for the C-level today.
Absolutely,
it's a major challenge. When I look out and I'm approached by a salesperson, and when I look at you, say, if I can look into LinkedIn and see who is that person, where has he been over the last month, and he's been in 3 or 4 different companies, there is no trust level. I don't know if he'll be here tomorrow. So I think that's part of the equation. We need to find that relationships are two-way streets.
Yeah. We buy from people that we like.
Right.
We don't buy from people that we don't like. And it's as simple as that. And therefore, you've got to be credible. You've got to be authoritative. You've got to be realistic about what you're doing. And you've got to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're going to fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail.
And what we see and what we've spoken about, every morning we need to get up and replan. We have to readjust our compasses, which way we want to go, which way we think the tendencies will lead us.
And this COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine have changed things dramatically on a day-by-day basis. The world is no longer as it was 2 years ago.
Right.
We are not going to return to the world of 2 years ago. The new world is different. We're already establishing new norms. How do we understand those? How do we grasp them? And what we're trying to do in the C-level selling courses is educate people how to become lifelong learners, how to learn about what's happening. We need to be social observers. We need to be able to understand the changes in the economy. We need to be understanding the changes in the political environment. If we can't do that, we shouldn't be in sales. We shouldn't be chief executives.
Trying to find a bottle of wine, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Stuart, I want to thank you, but for our audience, what's the best way for our audience to find you and learn more about what you can offer in helping the C-level selling strategies, planning, and training?
Well, as you've said in the introduction, my name's Stuart Morgan. I run a company called PDC, Practice Development Consultants, with my wife, who's got Ukrainian roots. And together we've worked in over 100 different countries. And we keep adding to that list on a day-by-day basis. I'm on LinkedIn. My profile picture on LinkedIn is the same that I think you're going to use, Tom. And so I'm Stuart Morgan. And I've got extensive global experience. I've got qualifications in a number of different disciplines. And I've got a team of people, including you, Tom, who work with me as associates. And we've got a great deal of experience and knowledge that we can bring to bear. We are available to talk to chief execs. We're available to talk to CFOs. We understand their language. You and I have been board-level directors for a long time now. We understand the boardroom. We understand what the world is like now, and we can make a difference.
And help people find tomorrow.
And help people find tomorrow.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Stuart. Always a pleasure. Pleasure to have worked with you personally. It's still a pleasure to be speaking, talking with you, following you over these years. So congratulations on what you do and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Tom, and look forward to working with you again shortly.
Hope so. We're looking forward to that. So thanks again. And for our listeners, you can find more about Stuart Morgan, as he said, on LinkedIn. So that's Stuart Morgan, Stuart, last name Morgan, and his company, PDC Wales, pdc.wales. I'd like to thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, www.focusmi.com. Talk to Brazil podcast can be found on all major podcast platforms. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.